I think a lot of people have difficulty with connection, or it could be me just projecting, because I've had a lot of difficulty with connection. And it seems to me that I have the best connection with others when I could really connect, and when I could really kind of understand what's alive inside of them. When I hear the things that they're saying, if I could embody that, feel what that's like inside of me, and then try to relate it back to them in a way so that they feel like, fuck yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling. That's exactly what I'm thinking. And I think for a lot of people, it's difficult to get to that level of connection and conversation and communication, because so many people are so activated inside their own bodies. I think a lot of people don't take care of what's alive inside of them. And a lot of times, instead of trying to speak for connection, they're trying to speak for attention. So that one person will say something, I'll be like, well, that reminds me of something that I'm thinking about myself. And then people just keep on going back and forth and ping-ponging, but not ever actually feeling felt. And it's really hard to feel felt unless you can kind of let go of your own story and just kind of absorb what the other person is saying and feel it. But that's a tough thing to do.
Welcome, everyone. This is Chris O, your host of PS Younger Self. I am really thrilled to have this special recording here in the Lisbon studio.
Yeah.
It's a Lisbon first. And with a friend of mine who I feel very honored to call a friend now and is a special guest today. My guest is Simon Stawski. He is a Lisbon-based creator who specializes in personal branding and consulting for community engagement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
And he's a YouTube veteran who has impressively garnered around 2 million followers across your channels.
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
And today, though, he likes to focus on the topics of psychology and consciousness on YouTube and Substack. And actually, these shared interest in those topics of areas in psychology and consciousness is really what connected us and sparked a lot of really thought-provoking, engaging conversations where I always felt Simon leaving our conversations extra something to think about.
Yeah.
So I thank you for that.
Sure, I'm glad.
Wanted to invite you today because I wanted to share our conversations that sparked that little extra curiosity with my audience. So welcome, Simon. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, I've always loved the conversations that we've had. Whenever we sit down and we share the ideas that we're grappling with, and what are you reading and what am I reading and how do these frameworks align, then it always seems like we have a great time. And I was really happy when you invited me to do an episode with you, because I love having these talks anyway. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And today, let's actually share a little context of why and how we decided on the topic of today's episode. And it was actually stemming from our last conversation a few weeks ago. And of course, we were having, like always, these great thought-provoking conversations that kind of diverge in different angles. And then you said and shared your philosophy on how you define connection and what it means to you. And I thought, that was very interesting, Simon.
Yeah, I remember I said that, and that really connected with you. And I'm just going to try to remember what was it that I said specifically about connection. So the thing that really, I'll try to riff here a bit about my thoughts on connection. So I think a lot of people have difficulty with connection, or it could be me just projecting, because I've had a lot of difficulty with connection. And it seems to me that I have the best connection with others when I could really connect, and when I could really kind of understand what's alive inside of them. When I hear the things that they're saying, if I could embody that, feel what that's like inside of me, and then try to relate it back to them in a way so that they feel like, fuck yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling. That's exactly what I'm thinking. And I think for a lot of people, it's difficult to get to that level of connection and conversation and communication, because so many people are so activated inside their own bodies. I think a lot of people don't take care of what's alive inside of them. And a lot of times, instead of trying to speak for connection, they're trying to speak for attention. So that one person will say something, I'll be like, well, that reminds me of something that I'm thinking about myself. And then people just keep on going back and forth forth and ping-ponging, but not ever actually like feeling felt. And it's really hard to feel felt unless you can kind of like let go of your own story and just kind of absorb what the other person is saying and feel it. But that's a tough thing to do.
That is a tough thing to do. And it sounds like the way you speak about it, you've clearly have done a lot of work and really connected to your internal state. And we actually had another great conversation about our admiration about the works of Lisa Feldman-Barrett.
Where 100%.
But I want to kind of circle back, if you can, because that was really interesting and great in how you explain and how you feel why maybe people don't feel connected. But from your philosophical point, like Simon's philosophical point, how would you define from your experience, like what a deep connection means and how do you know when you found and feel a deep connection? Because you really spoke about like that embodied experience.
So if I'm feeling connected with someone or if they're feeling connected with me, those are two kind of different things, but they kind of end up in the same way. So it's hard for me to have many conversations in which I could express what's alive in me and somebody actually like mirror that back. That's because it's just not that common, right? A lot of people will say instead what they're thinking about. But I've had many conversations with people in which they will open up to me and they'll say like, hey, here's what I'm feeling. Here's a problem that I'm going through. Here's what I'm struggling with. And then I'll kind of like sit with that and I just want to sense where that is in my body. Where do I feel that? Do I feel that in my chest when I hear that? Do I feel that in my face? Where is this in my body? And I think like that took me a long time to develop that sense of what is inside the body. Because I think that's interoception based on like the works of Lisa Feldman-Barrett. And that's a sense that we don't spend a lot of time developing. We have a lot of brain cells dedicated to vision, a lot of brain cells dedicated to sound, but not that many dedicated to like, what do our organs viscerally feel like?
Yeah.
So when somebody will tell me what they're going through, I'll sit with it, I'll feel it. And then as soon as I could find a way to explain it back to them, not necessarily explain it, like, haha, here's what's wrong with you. More like, it sounds like this is what you're feeling. It sounds like this is activating this need. You have this kind of need that isn't being met. And what I notice when people do feel felt and understood and connected, you could kind of see their bodies go, there's a softness. There's like they've had this thing activated. And as soon as it can reverberate in me or in someone else, it's just like a release in them. Like, holy fuck, yes, that's it. You get me, right? Because it's hard for people to get other people. It's like we're so trained to debate others. Like I think that's how I was like trained in school. Like compare and contrast. Here's what this person says. Find an argument against it. And all the stuff we see on like TV shows is like people arguing and like presidential debates. Rather than like how can we work together and like how do I steel man your argument? How do I really make you feel like I understand what you're thinking and saying? Because that's kind of what we want. We want to be understood. We don't want to be fought on every point that we say.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of what you said really hones in on our human kind of need for empathy. To be understood really is empathizing with someone, right? And when you spoke a lot about like feelings, like and understanding how someone feels and try to empathize with them from that feeling perspective. That's emotional empathy, right? But I feel like, tell me what you think about this, because I feel like there are people in my life who I certainly feel a deep connection with, who have we've established a deep emotional connection in terms of emotional empathy. And they make me feel, as you said, like seen and heard. But the feeling understood, I feel like is more cognitive empathy, like understanding why you think that way instead of why she or he may feeling that way. What do you think about that?
Well, let me see if I could understand what you're saying here. So it seems like with some of your friends, you feel like emotionally connected and emotionally understood, but not cognitively understood. So does cognitively for you kind of mean like they understand the ideas behind it, the reasoning behind it, as opposed to like, hey, I understand that you're like feeling some swirlies in your chest, but I don't understand why you're feeling the swirlies. Like, what's the distinction for you?
It's more about like they can understand kind of the steps behind the reasoning exactly. Reasoning why I may be thinking that way, why my perspective on the world may be that way. I'll give you an example.
Please.
So I think this would be an example. So I had a recent exchange with two dear friends of mine via text, which is not the best place to truly understand and empathize. You know, things could get lost. Exactly.
They do.
There's no tone in text unless maybe you're in all caps. But anyway, and I think it's worth to note that two of my other friends in that group chat are not native English speakers. And there's a reason why I point that out in a second.
Sure.
But one of them mentioned how she recently come to the realization that she wants a real family. And I asked her, what do you mean by real? Knowing that I have a adorable puppy who you've met, who to me is my baby.
You're damn right it is.
Yeah, you're also a dog parent.
Yeah.
And so I was a little like affected by the word real, but I didn't, attack in any way. I just, out of curiosity, asked, what do you mean by real? She's like, oh, no, she used the word proper. I want a proper family.
Oof.
Well, there you go. Your expression says it all.
Yeah.
But you're also a native English speaker, aren't you?
Yeah.
So she said, I want a proper family. I'm like, ooh, what do you mean by proper? This is, again, still via text. He goes, I think that a family with people with dogs or dog parents, I think a proper family is like a family with kids. And as you can imagine now, your expression says it all, that words inherently have denotation meaning, and that meaning of proper in an English language denotes something very specific, right or wrong, pretty much. So I took that a certain way, but I knew that my friend, who is a dear, dear, dear friend of mine, she loves me and she has good intentions, and I know that we both have a lot of love and respect. So I tried to give the benefit of that and knew, I don't think that's what she means, but trying to understand each other and continue this conversation via text was actually now spiraling out of control. Anyway, this whole long-winded point of my cognitive empathy is when we finally had an opportunity to talk in person, which I actually give her a lot of credit for initiating that, realizing that this actually is also a good example of like why in so many ways I formed a deep connection with her. But so I explained to her, even though she understood why I may have been emotionally affected by that word, but I explained why the word proper in the English language means something. And if you actually unintentionally use it in a certain way, it actually has a totally different meaning, and the receiver can interpret it differently. So cognitively, I was trying to explain to her why. Obviously, the emotional aspect is tied to it, emotional empathy. But in explaining it, I think it has a lot to do with cognitively. And once I broke it down to her, explaining the word in the English language, exactly, if you don't use it in a certain way, it will result in X, Y, Z interpretation, which then also may, I don't like the word trigger, but will activate, exactly, thank you, that we've learned. Emotional response.
Sure.
So, and she then cognitively got it, why I may be coming from, why I was thinking that way.
Okay, well, thank you, first of all, for sharing that story. And I definitely connected with this idea of like proper family. Like, fuck, I'm a dog father of two, and like they're definitely my babies in some way. And I think what arose here, like what you're speaking about in terms of cognitively, is like one of the challenges that we face with language, especially when it comes to like violent and nonviolent communication. And whenever we use kind of words that have a sense of like judgment in them, and when they try to enforce a sense of like what's proper, what's normal, what's right, what's wrong, right? What's good or what's bad. When we use those words, and if somebody doesn't fit into what this person is like understanding as like right and wrong, proper, and like a kind of like black and white reasoning, like this is right and this is not right, even if they don't intend that in their language, the language does carry that kind of weight.
Of course.
And trying to make people aware of like, hey, the words that you choose really matter. And if your language does have this like valence of judgment to it, then people that don't fit the norm that you're describing can feel activated. They can feel, like ostracized, like there's something wrong with me or whatnot. And that's not a good feeling to have. You want to feel connected. You want to feel a part of. You want to feel a part from someone, and so like that language for her, and especially as like a ESL speaker, then she doesn't understand, and that's cool. And the good thing to know here is that when somebody says something unintentionally, right? Like if they're not intending harm, you could try to listen to what they're saying, understand, okay, so this seems like maybe they're stuck with this kind of like black and white reasoning or whatnot. I know they don't mean that. Let me try to share, or let me try to understand them in a different way. Let me try to say what they're saying in different words. So what she really wants, she just wants to have her own children, is what she meant to say, right?
Exactly.
She could have said that without using the word proper, right?
Yeah.
And proper is kind of like a shortcut. Like a lot of times in our language, we use these shortcut words instead of taking the time to fully explain what we're saying, right? And this is where like a lot of like superlatives come in, and like I'm really fascinated like how like language really impacts our level of connection.
Oh, 1000%. And I think being very precise, like for me, it's become an active practice to be very precise with my word and very deliberate with my word because of the weight it carries and misuse of it, and also the unintentional use of it can have different impacts on the receiver, obviously. And so that example that I shared from expressing what I felt like that she showed, actually, to her credit again, cognitive empathy is because not to point out that my very dear friend misused the word and she shouldn't have done that. Not at all. It was actually this example to really illustrate like why and how we have such a deep connection. I knew that she's literally the person, my emergency contact in Lisbon.
Great.
When literally, she showed me in so many ways that she is a dear, dear friend of mine who has a deep connection with me, circling back to our core thesis or our topic of today. But that was just another way she beautifully illustrated that we have such a strong connection, because she showed, number one, curiosity to understand why. And I know that's another favorite word of yours, or a word that you also really like. And then when I can tell when I explained it, that it's like, oh, I get it now. And it's like, Chris, that's actually, you're right. That's not the word I was trying to use. And I said, perhaps you meant traditional. She's like, exactly.
Bingo.
But that's when we connected, and she showed, like, I get it, Chris. I get why you were thinking that way. But I want to circle back now to nonviolent communication. And because you've brought that up several times in our conversation.
I'm trying to get you to read the book.
I know. In a long list of books I should read next. But why I want to bring it up, because I know it's a very passionate kind of topic of yours, area, and you've done a lot of work on it. And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's perhaps kind of a tool or practice that's allowed you somehow to forge deeper connections. Am I wrong?
No, well, you're not wrong there, for sure. It's been a great tool for me to really understand how people speak, understand how sometimes the language that I use is a tragic expression of my own needs. And
what do you mean by that?
So oftentimes when like somebody is like wanting something or needing something, instead of vulnerably saying like, hey, when I see this, then I feel this and this happens inside my body. And then these thoughts kind of arise, and I don't necessarily like those thoughts, but they pop up. And then like I feel kind of disconnected. So would you be able to do this specific thing for me? That's so vulnerable and open, and people don't want to fucking say that. And instead, like, can you just do this shit? The fuck is wrong with you? Why didn't you do this? And like, so not necessarily we have to be like that passionate in our violence, but we use a lot of these like judgment words that tell people what they're doing wrong instead of telling others like what we want and what we feel.
So it's more like scapegoating versus explaining from your own place of need, like you said.
Of course, and explaining what that need is. And when you tell people like what they're doing wrong, they're not going to do the opposite, and they're not going to do something else out of a place of joy. They're going to do it out of a place of, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to be shamed. Like
or be defensive, right?
Yeah, right? And you want people to be able to contribute to your life out of a place of joy. Like, I'd love to be able to offer that need for you. If I see that this is what you're wanting, you really want some kind of connection, you really want some face-to-face, I get it. Awesome. Yeah, I'd be willing to do that now. And I think we connect more when we're more expressive of what's alive inside of us instead of what's wrong with the world.
Yeah.
And I think that like a lot of people are uncomfortable with expressing it. We have our egos, we have our defenses, we want to protect. We don't want to look weak. We don't want to look needy. We don't want to ask. Instead, we want to tell other people. And I know for me, like that was definitely a way that I communicated for a long time. And as soon as I got into nonviolent communication, I read the book like 3 or 4 times. I took a few workshops on it. I listened to it when I'm at the gym, like, no worries, doesn't necessarily work at the gym all too well. But since then, I've really been able to try to listen to people's needs behind their violence. How do I translate the things that they're saying? Because when people express like this sense of like, I want a proper family, that's violence in a minor way. It wasn't like an aggressive form of violence, but it did have that sense of judgment, and you did feel
the judgment implied.
Yeah, right. You felt a little bit, like a little bit of an activation in there. You're like, okay, what is my friend really trying to say? How do I handle this with grace? How do I try to understand what's really behind what they're saying? But that's tough.
That is tough.
That takes a lot of like being able to feel what you're feeling and just put that aside, disassociate from the activation from a bit.
Can you pause right there? So you're absolutely right. It is tough.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of us are very reactionary in that moment. So what practices and tools have helped you, first of all, not be reactionary? Is it just pausing? And you speak a lot about like feeling into your body, right?
Yeah.
So what is that like? Can you be a little bit more explicit?
Sure. You're right. A lot of people are very reactionary, in which like when they hear something, they got to react to it right away. I could sometimes just take a little bit of silence. There's nothing wrong with some silence. There's nothing wrong with a bit of breath. I think it weirds some people out sometimes. Like,
if I'm across from you and all of a sudden you're like, what am I supposed to do with that? Yeah,
right? No, we need to hear things all the time, right away, keep talking. So I could take a breath in and just so there's a 4-step framework, right? So I want to be able to express the thing that I've seen objectively, right? So kind of like when I heard you say the word proper, right? That's something that the camera can pick up. Right? But how do we separate our observations from our judgments? Instead of saying like, when you were a bitch to me the other day, right? That's not an observation, that's a judgment of your actions.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you like just say, what is the observation without that? So just as objectively as possible. Then you say, okay, what did you feel? What did I feel in my body? How do I describe that? I felt scared. I felt sad. I felt alone. I felt activated. I felt like running away, right? And it's about how do you describe the feeling inside you? And it's not like a lot of people confuse their feelings and their thoughts. Like, I feel that Trump is horrible. That's not a feeling. That's a thought, right? That's a judgment. What is it, the body internally, just within you, what is that feeling? And then the tough part is expressing what is it that you need, right? And so like in nonviolent communication, they give you this kind of list, these cue cards, like here's a list of feelings, here's a list of needs. So for the first few months when I had it, I was just a robot. When I saw you do this, I felt this because I need this. Can you do this? And that's something that's common within nonviolent communication. If you're not comfortable with it at first, you kind of need to get the muscle memory, kind of like any sport, right?
Exactly. Or exercising at the gym.
Yeah. You gotta build up those reps and get more comfortable with it. And as soon as I kind of was able to know what all of these needs are, and what are the common needs that arise in me most often, and where did I get these needs from, whatever like mother wounds I got when I was younger or whatnot. And I could link a lot of that to there. And then how do I express a request for a need being met rather than a demand?
That's a key word there. A request for something. I feel like, I know, again, I'll speak for myself and please interject and agree, disagree. But in relationships, romantic relationship dynamics, I'll speak from my personal experience, especially like when you now described like what nonviolent communication really is and how to use it properly. It's making me realize, well, I've come to realize in recent times that sometimes when communicating with my partner, is that I had, not always, but I had a tendency, I come to realize that I was using passive-aggressive behavior. But I feel like, and maybe this was me partly trying nonviolent communication without even understanding it. Tell me what you think. Sure. So I'll give a recent example. There was an exchange with this important, special person in my life. And I knew very consciously that this was via text, that, again,
text.
Lesson people.
Text, get off your screens.
Get off the screen. Have IRL conversations. Okay, but I knew consciously that my tone and delivery was a bit off, not as, it was a little uncharacteristic of me, not in our normal, everyday kind of light and lovey and all that stuff. Because I was coming from a state of not feeling so great about something between us. But I also give him a lot of credit in terms of he never gets activated. He's like Zen, always has helped me become very, like it never, he's always helped me de-escalate, like, or prevent escalation because of his calmness. But so back to, I actually reread my messages to him a few days later. And I was like, ooh, yeah, this is uncharacteristic of me, Chris. Like the tone, it wasn't aggressive by any means. We have so much respect in our connection that's never like that. But I just knew, and I didn't like the delivery of it. So what I did actually was, I sent a voice message, which is better than text.
It is.
And
sometimes. Unless it's one of those 10-minute ones. Oh, I hate those.
Nobody wants to. Me too. It's like, rewind. You need chapters.
Yes.
Right?
Can I just get AI to transcribe it for me, please?
It wasn't a 10-minute voice message. But I actually explained to him that, number one, I don't know how you receive the message, but I'm not happy with the tone and delivery of my message. And I know why I was coming from that place and had delivered the message that way. And I actually explained to him the why was really missing our frequent connection, our frequent communication. So it was expressing my need. I don't think I ended it with the request, but it was me really becoming self-aware of why I acted uncharacteristically, not being proud of myself, but not, shaming myself in any way, but taking corrective measures because I didn't want him to take it the wrong way, but truly understand why I was coming from that place.
Okay, so let me see if I got this right. So it sounds like you sent him a text message that to you read as passive-aggressive. And then you said a few days later, you sent him a voice message to explain where you were coming from in that message. And what you realized in both was that your need for connection wasn't being met. And you really just wanted to feel some kind of connection. And because of this need, you got a little activated and it wasn't getting met. And you want to get it met through him. And so like you sent this voice message, this text message with a sense of like passive aggression. perhaps not intentionally to get him to respond. But sometimes people do respond to like a sense of like aggression if they see like, holy fuck, what is this message? And then it kind of triggers them. And I think sometimes we're taught in our childhood that like activating in some ways or like being passive aggressive in some ways has given us the attention that we were seeking.
Yeah. Well, because I've learned it's a manipulation tactic.
Sure.
But obviously, my intention was not to manipulate someone I deeply care about. But the point of bringing up that example after learning from you, like one nonviolent communication is like, like my passive aggressive messages were coming from a place of not actually knowing how to, at the moment, express my need. So instead, it came across in that passive-aggressive tone, which was not ideal. But thankfully, I realized a couple days later, I'm like, that wasn't ideal. I want to express that wasn't my intent, but this is why it came across that way. This is my need.
Sure. And I think a lot of people think about like, well, this isn't my intent. My intention isn't to harm. My intention isn't to hurt. I think from like most of the times that I've seen examples of like my intention wasn't to be harmful or hurtful, I hear that a lot. Right? Like you could hear that in many people's conversations. Well, I didn't intend to do that. Like I once had a conversation with my brother in which he said some things that were kind of painful. He's like, well, I didn't intend that, so you should be fine. Right? Well, it's not my intention.
That's not taking any accountability on their end.
Of course, you know, and so a lot of people, I think they just aren't able to express really what their intentions are. And their intentions are for the sense of connection, because I think that's truly what we really want. We really want connection, but we've been we've been given all the wrong tools for it.
Exactly.
Right? We want to make an omelet and all we have is like a hammer and a piece of paper. And like, how am I supposed to do something like this? We actually don't see in media a lot of examples of people actually having good conversations. A lot of TV shows, like they romanticize anxious attachment and like blow-ups and whatnot rather than like securely attached people that can really explore the triggers safely and like have long conversations. Media has to be really quick and to the point, and it doesn't allow for long explorations of what's alive in each other.
So true.
And so we don't have role models to follow. You know?
Because they want to produce like the drama that actually sells and gets people excited about it. And if you see like a safe, peaceful, and healthy relationship between two people, people don't think like, is that normal? Is that boring? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, because people don't want boring. If it bleeds, it leads. We need like you don't really see any movies in which it's like, they're just fine through the whole movie, the end. There's always like, there's got to be some crazy shit that happens, some kind of conflict, and then the resolution. And that's like most story arcs. But our lives aren't the stories that we think they are. That we're not the main characters of Lord of the Rings. We have regular, basic lives. And what really feels better than trying to live out these stories is to feel connected and understood and to connect with other people and to understand them. It feels great when you could understand what another person is saying. I'm guessing that when you had that conversation with your friend about the word proper, and you two understood each other, that felt fucking good.
That felt amazing,
right? That felt great.
Probably at one point, like we got a little like teary-eyed too, because it really and she's so incredibly like expressive too. She has a huge heart, and we both embrace each other in a huge hug afterwards, like thanking each other, expressing a love for one each other, but also that we are grateful for one another to be open to have these uncomfortable conversations, to truly understand each other's perspective. We may not have to agree all the time, but it's like, but again, you get me, right? Like, you get me, like, emotionally, empathetically, and then that cognitive, you get it. It's like, yes, now I get your perspective. And it definitely did.
Yeah. And uncomfortable conversations are the best conversations. Like, if you're just, like, riffing back and forth, and I don't know, I get kind of bored after a while. But if we can like really get to like an uncomfortable part and like explore a vulnerability and I could understand you a bit more, man, that's so rewarding. Those are my favorite talks. Like I've done so much small talk and I just tend to tune out. My attentional resources get diffused in the end. It's like, I gotta go. I can't do this anymore.
You know? That's exactly why, again, like I spoke so highly of our few, but really in-depth, like engaging conversation because I'm allergic to small talk too.
Great.
Back in the day, I don't know if I ever told you, but I think my first year here, I organized like supper clubs. And I did, you didn't know this, but my posters on the streets of Lisbon literally said, let's skip the small talk. Because I agree that like when that kind of like, I don't want to say empty, but the very typical, like, where are you from or what do you do? Like, that to me is like the least interesting thing.
Of course.
Like, not as in like, I don't care about what you do and if that's your passion, etc.
Yeah.
But when we actually, I feel, when we can really deeply also connect is when we realize we have shared some type of shared experience, lived experience, as well as sharing the vulnerabilities like you spoke about earlier, rather than like, this is what I do and, I'm trying to make 50 million the next round, la, la, la. I'm like, tell me like what scares you. Tell me what's your lived experience. Tell me what your biggest fear was, etc.
I agree. I think when people talk about what they do, a lot of the people that when I hear them say what they do, I don't really hear any emotion behind what they do. Like, this is my job, this is what I do, this is what I'm trying to do. And it's more just a sense of trying to achieve a goal. But there's nothing emotional. There's no way that my body can connect to that in any way. I can just understand, okay, this is the story that you want to follow, right? And this is the kind of person that you want to be and the kind of life that you want to live. But I don't feel any that there's no way that can connect within me unless I've done the exact same job, right? But if you tell me you're afraid of something, I think I know what fear feels like. If you tell me that you're sad about this, I think I know what that feels like. If you tell me that you're anxious, I like to ask people, where do you feel your anxiety in your body? Like, I feel mine usually right here. My girlfriend feels hers in her neck. I know someone else that feels it in their stomach. And cool, right? Like, how does your body process these emotions in specific ways? And then I could try to locate that within myself. Like, how do we stay connected with ourselves and with others at the same time, instead of disconnecting from ourselves and losing ourselves in their stories and their thoughts and imagination.
Got it. So you mentioned your girlfriend. So do you guys actively practice nonviolent communication? And
Sure. Yeah. Well, I got into it before she did. And so like there was a bit of a learning curve that happened with her. I remember the first time she learned the 4-step framework of like, I see, I feel, I need, and can you? I remember her first example was, I see that you're an asshole and I feel that you're an asshole. I need you to not be an asshole. So can you stop being an asshole? It's hilarious. Absolutely. We were crying with laughter, way off the mark with nonviolence. But
she followed the
She followed the steps. She followed the steps. And it was great.
Can't blame her.
And we laugh about it to this day. And so now, like, we've gotten a lot better at it, at expressing ourselves with this. And, you know, like, a big challenge is, like, it's easy for me to express, like, hey, I've experienced something with a different friend that was challenging. Okay. And then, like, express that story to her. And she'd be like, wow, like, I get that. It sounds like this. And it feels like this. And she could really empathize and connect. And I could feel felt and heard. The biggest challenge is always like, hey, I feel something challenging within the relationship with you, with something that you've done. Because as soon as you like...
Has she expressed that before?
Yeah.
And how have you guys addressed that then?
Oh, we've been very aware of this. And so, like, a lot of the times, like, when I know that there's this conversation that needs to be had, like, she's done something that I found pretty activating, then it always starts with, like, well, number one, don't have the conversations at night. Right? When you're tired and when you're trying to go to bed, then your body isn't ready to hold space for somebody else. And I'm so guilty of doing that sometimes, even still. And I regret that. The ideal version of me that I do try to follow is like, hey, in the morning after we've had breakfast, after we've had our morning run and we've exercised and we've been able to get out some of this energy, then I'll ask, like, hey, I want to be able to speak with you about something. And the conversation might be challenging. Do you have space to hear what's alive in me right now? Right? So
and you speak like that.
Yeah. So it's a slow way, because sometimes when we feel something, like, I just gotta fucking tell you right now. And you just let it all out. And we don't check if the other person's ready for it. Like, they might be processing something else.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, we just emotionally dump. Like, now's the time. I feel it now. You're going to process it now. And hang on, I'm not ready for this. And then if she's not ready, she could be like, okay, I'm not ready yet. I've got this that I'm going through. Can we reconnect in maybe an hour? And like, I think I'll be able to give you the space that I want to be able to give you. Because that's what we want. Because like conflict, I think for a lot of people, as soon as there's like, okay, one person feels something that the other person did that hurt them, then we get defensive and we get protective. And we're like, this is, instead of seeing as like, okay, so here's something that didn't work well. How can we calibrate in the future? This is an opportunity for us to do better.
Yeah.
And I usually give the example of like team sports. And I think a lot of people didn't grow up playing team sports while I grew up playing basketball.
Okay.
And I've been on some teams in which like, if I missed a shot and the other person on my team starts like telling me, oh, you fucked up and why'd you take that shot and this and that, then that team dynamic isn't really good and we don't play that well. But on the teams in which like if somebody misses a shot and they miss it a couple of times, then we could call a timeout. We could like take a little bit of breather from the game. You got to be like, okay, so let's drop a new plan. How about we try doing this? And how about we try doing that? How do we achieve our goals in different ways? Because the way that we've been doing it isn't really achieving the goals that we want to achieve. If you view you and your partner as a team, rather than like two people in like a relationship, like, hey, like I need this and I need this. How are we both as a team trying to achieve a shared goal together? And I think that kind of framework has really helped us acknowledge each other in different ways. And we have a phrase that we use for each other. Okay. Kind of safety phrase and says, you're safe. I'm your partner. Our love is bigger than this blank. And we're going to get through this together.
Oh, it's really beautiful.
And it kind of like helps us remember the spirit of like teamwork and companionship. And it helps us get through conflicts better. Again, not all the time.
You know? But you know that tool is there that you guys created together with this shared kind of mission of like knowing why we're together, why we want to be together, and why this phrase is here for us to remind us of that. Oh, that is really beautiful. I like that.
Thank you.
Like you said, it might not be all the time, but like if we're, let's say, role playing and we were in an activated conversation. Does one just remind the other? In your relationship, do one of you just remind the other person that like, oh, wait, maybe this is when we should use our phrase to like remind each other?
Yes, sometimes we do. So like if the other person's activated and they're feeling very challenged, it'd be like, can you say the words to me? And we'll say, okay, let's nice, or we sometimes just like hold hands and like, let's have a few breaths together. And really breathe and synchronize our breathing and try to synchronize our heartbeats and feel like, how do our bodies resonate with each other? Because I think that resonance, like when you try to like communicate and have connection with someone, isn't just in terms of ideas, of like how do our ideas resonate, but how do our bodies feel the same thing?
Totally.
Right.
And like, we learned that also from Lisa Feldman Barrett's work, but our nervous systems influence each other. And I was also learning when you said like, you guys have a practice of synchronize even your breathing, that another kind of biological or physiological expression of a social bond is when your physiological like states are synchronized, whether it's your breathing or even heart rate. So that's so beautiful that you guys even have that practice, because I wanted to circle it on and the question of like, what are some other practices? But it seems like, synchronizing your physiological state, whether it's through breathing, you guys have a phrase, you guys practice nonviolent communication.
Exactly. And like also like checking to see if the other person has the space to offer space.
That was such a good point. And I think people forget that too, again, because they're just in a hurry to just release it.
I need to get this out right away.
But without, again, when you're having a conversation, whether it's a friend or a colleague or your partner, it is a two-way conversation, right? Right? And if the other person isn't ready, it might not be the most optimal time.
Right. And then your needs won't be met, right? If you try to just dump right away, then you got a low probability of feeling understood and heard. So just wait a little bit. You could be patient. You could hold it for a few hours. Like go journal, go for a run, go eat something nice. Like find some other ways to substitute until both of you can come in a collaborative spirit to process this.
And you know, that reminded me of something that I learned many years ago when I first started my career in PR of all things, and it evolved into digital marketing, etc. But I remember my boss, many years ago, taught me when you're pitching over the phone. This is, I mean, obviously we had email then, but we still did a lot of phone pitching to reporters. He taught me. This ties back to you saying, asking the person if they have the space and time to never start a phone pitch directly with your pitch, but always start with the question, is this a good time?
Yeah.
And wow, no, I didn't link the two, but it's the same thing.
Beautiful.
How you just said that you guys practice in asking the other person, is this the good time for you? But I think in any relationship dynamic, it's number one, respecting the state that the other person may be in, mental state, physiological state, etc. And then giving them the opportunity to tell you when is the best time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I like that you were able to connect this back to like your business in PR back before. I think that a lot of people are so career driven and career minded, and we've like internalized this sense of work so much. And I think a lot of like work dynamics suggest a level of professionalism that isn't really empathetic. Like, we just got to get this work done. How do we do this? Don't open up. We don't have any time for this. We don't have any space for this. Can you just get this done quickly? There's a sense of like rushing and cutting corners and forgetting that the people that you are doing business with are people as well. We don't ever turn that off. We are always human beings.
Why do we forget that? Yes.
And like in business situations, we kind of use like professionalism and business language as kind of an excuse for emotional abuse in some ways, and of like not treating other people kindly and with empathy.
So on that note then, like, how do you practice in your professional life of showing empathy and not being so showing the human side of it to forge a deeper connection with your, whether it's client, because you're a consultant, and I would say the ones, at least again from my experience, because I have clients too, that this was a very recent experience too, but like when we connect on a human level, that I do feel like we've established a relationship at that point where this isn't just a business transaction, but now I'll just say one word, is that, or very briefly, that my client recently told me that I even like the fact that we have shared values. I mean,
beautiful.
That's so beautiful,
that's
right?
Great.
And that is such an illustration of connecting on a human level, right? Versus I pay you to do this.
Exactly.
But I actually respect you and value that we have shared values.
Yeah. I'm so happy you experienced that. That's a great feeling.
I felt very lucky.
Yeah. One of my clients also, she's a therapist in the UK, and we just align in so many ways. And whenever I do some kind of work and she really appreciates it, and she shares her appreciation with me, then I tell her how this has really made me feel appreciated, and I feel very warm and motivated, and I thank her for that. It's not just you sent me this money and so the work's done. I feel great, and that you are enjoying this thing, and I'm appreciating this emotional exchange, not just the financial exchange. And I think that when it comes to how people operate in business, a business relationship is just like any other relationship. You and me right now are having this relationship. We're sharing this moment right here. We're trying to co-create something, a piece of content for your YouTube channel. But we're also sharing our emotions here and trying to understand each other. And when you work with a client, it's still a human relationship. When you have a romantic partner, it's still the same thing. What are the goals that we're trying to achieve together? What are we trying to build with one another? And we got to understand that building comes from the ground up. We got to feel it within our bodies, and then how can we honor what's alive in both of us and both of our talents, and see what we can co-create in this way. But I think that's a very different framework of business. While a lot of business is typically hierarchical, like I give you money, you obey, you are the slave, you do this job, and we don't necessarily connect and co-create. So that's one framework that I really have in my communication with my clients. When it comes to creating digital content myself as well, then I also I'm feeling very challenged lately, and I don't necessarily have the answer for this one yet, but I'm trying to figure out how to go back to the original promise of social media, because I'm old enough to remember when it came around.
Same.
Yeah. And it came with the promise of connection. It was so like, hey, we're gonna like social media so you could connect with your aunt in this country, you could connect with friends from high school. And the language of it was connection. But we've lost that now, and social media has now been fueled by attention rather than connection. How do we do something more vibrant? How do we, whenever you edit, how do you have these like graphics pop up behind us and like keep everyone's attention going rather than
how do I get more views?
How to, instead of just like the quantifying, like you can't quantify qualities. And the qualities that I'm trying to share in my videos are of things that are alive in me, connecting with the people that are watching my content, the people that leave comments. I will leave long responses back to them to really try to understand what they're saying. Thank you for watching this, and thank you for taking the time to tell me how you feel about this. And to write, there's so much other shit you could be watching.
True.
But you watch this, so I feel grateful, and I want to express gratitude in this co-created space that we've had. So thank you for participating. Now, is that something that like that really goes against the whole viral method that like all marketers are trying to do? How do you get viral? And I think viruses are kind of gross. Nobody wants a virus. We kind of like have it forbidden and we want to get rid of it. But that doesn't really build the connection that you want to have with your audience. And for a lot of my YouTube career, I wasn't interested in viral content. I was so interested in connecting with the audience. I didn't connect in the most healthy way before.
Why? What do you mean by that? Why wasn't it healthy?
Okay. So my YouTube channel was very successful. And, you know, I had a lot of viewers. I even remember when I went to Singapore airport, so many people were waiting for me that the police were called and the terminal was shut down. And people followed me in taxis and slept in hotel lobbies and whatnot. And
like
there
celebrity.
Was, but being a celebrity sucks. And I think every celebrity will tell you that. I didn't have the money or the bodyguards of a celebrity. I just had this like kind of like relationship with people that kind of looked like idolizing instead of like how do we connect and like form like a healthier sense of relationship. And at the same time, I was also so motivated by the views. There's something called audience capture that I'm so afraid of, and I really am super conscious of the content I create now to not fall back into that pattern, in which the best example I can give you is there's a YouTuber called Nick Avocado or something along those lines. It's close to that. And when he started YouTube, he was a 17-year-old vegan violin player. And he just played violin and no one gave a shit. Until one day he's like, you know what? I've never tried McDonald's. Let me try McDonald's.
Oh, because he's vegan.
And he did it on camera, and that video got so many views. He's like, oh, wow. Okay, let me try Burger King. So many views. Few years later, he's so overweight that he's on like a breathing machine now.
Wow.
That's an example of audience capture in which you kind of lose your sense of self.
Exactly.
You become something different based on the feedback of the views that you get from your audience. And I found that I changed in many ways based on that. And I don't want to let that happen again. I want to make sure that I stay true within myself, within my body, with my values, and create from that space rather than creating based on what's going to do very well in my videos.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for holding space. That was a long talk there. Oof.
No, but like that really ties in like beautifully again with the core like theme of today's topic is about, you know, deep connection. I thank you for like sharing it here with, you know, not just me, but other listeners and how real. And I feel like when you share stories like that, it also shows people that, again, Simon is also a human at the end of the day. You know, even when he had a period in his life when he had, you know, people chasing him down and and it may have felt like he's a celebrity, but at the end of the day, he's still a human with feelings, and like it wasn't healthy for you, and you realize now.
Yeah.
So first of all, congratulations, and
thank you.
coming to I mean that in a place of knowing who you are authentically and like living in that power, because I feel like, at least from my perspective, so many people, especially in our current state of times where, most people live their lives digitally for attention, which I agree that you said, that it strays from the true authenticity of like what they truly value. Like again, your Nick Avocado example, it just strayed further away from his core values as a vegan.
Yep.
And so I think that story really also just like shows the human depth of like who you are.
Thank you. And this is why I kind of like love having this conversation with you, because I forget how long ago we got in contact, but I just love that you're creating this content based on like what you're learning, and you're just like, how do I integrate these things that I'm learning? The best way to learn something is to teach it. And so you take it in, you try to share this message, and you're not using this to further your career. You're not trying to go viral. You're not trying to like build your business from this. This is just you authentically sharing what ideas that you're going with, and that so resonates with my core values. And I thank you for taking the time to do this and for inviting me to have this conversation here too.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing that. Really, it means a lot, and I feel that also again like just underscores our connection and being understood. That really does mean a lot, because it truly is like why I did start. Even the podcast, it was just to feed my curiosity, and I'm so glad that it's coming across that way. But on that note of thanking each other, and you also pointed it out how you practice it in your professional life with your clients. And I really want to kind of hone in on that, because I do feel like what I'm hearing, that this practice of showing appreciation, which may seem kind of trivial or like what, it's not a big deal, but truly like showing appreciation, not just to say like thanks at the end of an email, but showing appreciation as in like, oh, this really meant a lot. I think that is really much more profound, or has a much more profound impact on building that connection.
Of course. I think like I'm in a privileged position in which like I'm able to like have clients and do work that I find meaningful. And I know a lot of people don't have that feeling in their jobs. I know a lot of people are doing work just because they have to do work. And it feels like really painful to them, and they don't get this sense of appreciation from it as well. So knowing that I have the clients that like really align with my values, I definitely want to be able to convey that to them as well, that I'm not just here for work. I'm not just here to get money. I'm here because I believe in what you're doing, and I want to help contribute to that and help that grow, and use all the skills that I have and all the resources that I have to be able to help build that as well. And I'm lucky to be able to have that. And I don't have an answer as to how everyone else can have that. I wish other people can feel that as well. And if there is some way that like bosses or managers or whatnot can show like a sense of human appreciation for what people are going through, I think that would be very useful. I'm starting to get into systems theory a little bit, and I definitely don't have enough vocabulary to be able to talk about it at all.
And today's not the day.
Today is not the day. Speak to me in a few months after I've had many more talks with ChatGPT about this. But I remember somebody who was in systems theory, and she told me that like one of the things that she does for like organizations is help the people at the top really connect with what's alive in the people at the bottom. Like how are they feeling about their position? How are they feeling about their work? How do you shoot the shit with them? Instead of having all these long Zoom meetings that don't really matter, can you cut those shorter and spend some time really connecting with your people on a human level? I think that's one way to do it, but I also know that there's been like some clients I've worked with that don't do that at all. And those relationships just didn't work out in the end. So
wow, that's such a great like framework to apply like in the professional space that I don't think it's practice a lot.
I just also want to say I'm very happy here that you brought all these cue cards and we didn't look at them once.
I know. It says,
not a single one.
It says everything about why our conversations are always like so fluid and engaging that, because I'm always well prepared for everything, even my Zoom or online recording. But,
sure.
So I wanted it more kind of as a crutch.
Okay.
But I'm so grateful that I didn't even need them. It sat there.
Of course, perfect.
Our organic conversation just flowed beautifully. I
love that.
But
great framework. I love that. Yes, not but by and. Everyone, take that in.
Seriously, it's a new practice too. But I just want to, on the note of appreciation, thank you also. I can not only just sharing your personal lived experience and how you put things into practice, because I think that says a lot about someone's kind of evolution and growth, because I do a lot of reading too, you do too, and it's easy to just consume, especially in our digitized world. But like real growth in if the goal is, back to this topic of conversation, to forge deeper human connections, consume the information, knowledge, and wisdom from different people, but put it into practice. How are you putting it into practice? So thank you for sharing those examples of how you practice it and what you've learned, both your romantic relationship. I've learned a couple of things there.
Great.
Yeah. And your professional things. So thank you. I do have a closing tradition.
Okay, great.
Yeah, on the PS Younger Self podcast. And it is, Simon, if you can go back to any stage or year in Simon's younger life, what is one piece of wisdom you would pass on to him to remind him to live in the present and on his own terms?
Oh my God. This is so tough because I'm such a different person than I am even like 4 years ago. Like I wouldn't be able to have this kind of talk 4 years ago. I didn't have this vocabulary or framework. The piece of advice that I would try to give is be patient and really try to understand what people are feeling. I think I made a lot of mistakes by not connecting with what's alive in people. And I think I've damaged a lot of relationships that way. And I wish I would have known this sooner. And I wish that I could have had this kind of patience and really trying to understand people rather than just trying to protect myself or show myself off.
That's beautiful. Beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And thank you for living so authentically. On the last note, you have to tell the audience if they would like to connect with you, find you all over the web. Where is the best way to connect with Simon?
Thanks. So you could find me on Instagram, Simon's Book Club. And I talk about books there, but I also talk about like some of the different lectures that I'm listening to. I have a Substack called Simon's Book Club. I just wrote my first post there, and I'm going to write another one soon on AI shaming. It's a fun topic. So look up Simon's Book Club, and you'll find me on different social media platforms.
Awesome. Thank you, Simon, for today.
Thank you for this talk. I loved it.